Now, I don't know about most of you. However, I'm just going to tell you my personal experience. I grew up in a biker gang. I don't know if you know this, but I did. When I was like 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, I was in a biker gang. Our bikes didn't have motors on them. They were just powered by our legs and like Huffy or whatever the Walmart brand of bikes is. I don't know. We went through those bikes, but we had a biker gang. We lived off of Jackson Street, and we had a little crew together. We had some friends in the neighborhood, and of course there was our brother, which happens to be visiting with us this morning. Hey, what's up, brother? But he's in the front row too. I don't know. I didn't have to pay him. He's in the front row. This is not good. Growing up, he always told me I was stupid and had nothing good to say. So I don't know what's happening here. Little brother. So I had my little brother there. We had some cousins that, again, if you were here last week, I told you we lived with our cousins for a little bit. There's 4 boys in bunk beds in this 13 by 13 room, enough room for the door to open, and that was pretty much it. And then they had these bunk beds. It was a life. We were incredible. Well, all of those cousins were a part of the biker gang, and then we had a couple other guys. They were from the neighborhood. They were in the biker gang too. And we could ride in formation together. You know what I'm talking about? Like flying V, like Mighty Ducks. We could do that if we needed to. If we were coming up on another biker gang, you know what I'm saying? We want to intimidate them. We can fly in V that bad boy. You know what I'm saying? Let's go. Let's go. The coolest thing about our biker gang, though, was that we had a special call that we could call and get the other biker gang people to come out. So we didn't have to waste time or put at risk our ride by parking it on the street or in someone's driveway. We could just pull up in front of the house and do the call, and it didn't matter. If you had a brick house with insulation and a vault door and everything, you could still hear our call through all that. And it's a really unique call. It was fantastic, and I'll do it for you. I'm going to share the secret with you. It was really easy. Do you remember it? He doesn't remember it. You're about to remember it. It was real simple. You just sat there on your bike and you said, you know what I'm talking about? See? Yeah, that's all you did. And if you heard that, you knew, let's go. We got business to take care of. Let's go. Now, I don't know what that business was other than us getting into trouble, right? But that's business, though. That's what we would do. We had a crew. We had a gang. We've been talking about relationships, friendships these last few weeks. I wanted to make sure that you expanded your vocabulary a bit. Just in case you get caught in a conversation, or you decide, you know what, I've been a loner for a while, I need to branch out and have some friends. You know that awkward conversation, you know how all friendships go. At some point you got to say, do you want to be my friend? You know what I'm saying? Like, you have to say that. I'm just kidding. But just in case you decide to have that awkward conversation, I wanted to give you some other words for friendship or for friends that you could use just in case you're like, I don't want to be lame and just say you want to be my friend. You could insert any of these, and these are synonyms for friends. There was an enormous list, by the way. I pared it down just to some of my favorites. You could say, hey, instead of just saying, hey, you want to be my friend? You could say, hey, you want to be my confidant? You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, we're sophisticated. Excuse me, would you like to be my confidant? You know what I'm saying? Or you could say, hey, you want to be my chum? My chum? You want to be my broski? My buddy? My homeboy? My ally? My bestie? My BFF? This is a good one. You want to be my musketeer? Here's a good one. You want to be my mucker? You got to be careful with that one. You got to be careful. I'm saying? You got to be careful with it. You want to be my mucker? You want to be my cully? My compatriot? My cobber? Friends. The truth is, it doesn't matter what you call them. You know them when you got them, don't you? In fact, you ain't got to put a title on it. You don't have to have that conversation. You want to be my friend? And I've been asking you as we walk through this particular collection of talks to kind of think through and consider the friends in your life right now, and to filter what the Bible has to say about friendships through the actual friendships in your life. Today is especially important. If you've zoned out and not really put to to really good use the friendships in your life, that filter in the last couple of talks. Okay, there's a pass. Today, you got to do it. Okay? You got to do it. There's a guy named Solomon. Solomon is known for his great wisdom. In fact, we find a section of the Bible that is all about wisdom. It's wisdom literature. And so there's some talk about relationship, friendships in this wisdom literature. So I thought it made sense for us to conclude by kind of walking through some really wise thoughts and wise sayings about friendships and relationships and their role and how it works. So we look at this one particular place where there's some friendship talk. And what I want to do, there's actually two sections. I want to start at the back section, the end section, and then I'll go to the front section, and that's where we'll finish. So I just want to read it to you. There's going to be a statement and then some proof text that says, hey, because of this statement, right, I want to make sure that you understand why this statement is true. And he's going to lay out a few very specific proof texts that says, if this is true, then my overall statement is valid and carries some weight. We find it in the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 4, verses 9 through 12. We'll put it on the screen. Here is the big statement. He says this, 2 are better than 1. And then he's going to have a string of things that kind of prove that this makes sense. 2 are better than 1 because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. Also, if 2 lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? Though one may be overpowered, 2 can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. He's going to make a case for friendship, and he starts just with the simple statement, 2 are better than 1. Now, he begins his case with the idea that because there's a good return for their labor. In other words, there is an admission that there's work to be done. And any good work always results in progress. The reason that we're working is because we're progressing towards some type of end or some continuation that gets us to an end. And so work is progress, or at least work is supposed to be about progress. And so we're progressing towards whether it's creating something and there's a product, or whether we're moving in a direction, or where we're accumulating something, there's progress in that work. And he says if 2 is better than 1 because you get a greater return, you get greater progress than just with 1. But we also know that that's not always true, is it? Like sometimes having a second person slows things down. Let's talk about changing your oil for a second. If you've never changed your oil, I'm going to tell you some basic steps of, hey, this is how it works. First, you got to make sure the car or the truck is not going to roll on top of you while you're moving. So you got to put like a brake on. That's always good. And then you got to go up under there, and you're going to find an oil pan somewhere up underneath that thing, and there's going to be a little bolt in it. And you're going to take that bolt, and you're going to, turn it to where it loosens up, and you're going to pull it out. And when you pull it out, oil's going to immediately start coming out of there, unless you're like, I happened to one time run a car out of oil, and so if you were to do it, nothing would have come out. It's not good for the car, by the way. It ruined the whole thing. It was a cracked head gasket. It was I was like 17. It is what it is. I learned my lesson. I have never done it again. Anyway, that's beside the point. So when you open that bolt up, oil is going to come out. So you got to have something to catch it in. Or if you just have like a gravel driveway, you can let it. It's not good though. EPA shows up. You're in a lot of trouble. I don't know where those people are, but for sure. If you're like most people, you catch it in something. If you're a decent human being, you're going to catch the oil in something. And you're going to go in your backyard, dig a hole, and put it in there. You know what I'm saying? That's what you're going to do. I'm not saying that's what you're supposed to do. I'm just saying that's what most people I know that I'm aware of that change their own oil, that's what they end up doing. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that. If you're watching online, the EPA, we're covered. Okay, no lawsuits. Right, so that's it. And so after you drain the oil out, you got to put the little bolt back in there, plug it back up. And then you got to take off the oil filter. And when you take off the oil filter, you got to inspect the gasket, make sure it's not ruined and it didn't leave something up in there. And then you get rid of that. And then you got to put the new one on. But first, you got to take your finger and you got to dip it in the oil and put it around the gasket and make sure it's all nice and lubed up. And you put it back on there, screw it back in. And then you go back to the top of the vehicle and you put the oil back in, the new oil, and you close it up and your oil's changed. That's it, right? Now, here's the deal. If you were to bring someone who had never changed their oil before and say, hey, you want to help me change my oil? And you're like, hey, you just hop under there. I've already secured the truck. It's not moving. And just find the bolt and undo it. They get under there and I'm like, well, how do I know which one the oil pan is? Well, that's the one with the bolt on it. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of bolts down here. Well, does any of them look like a pan that would hold oil? There's a lot of things that look like it. If they don't know, they don't know. And so what do you got to do? You got to get underneath and you got to teach them. You got to show them. On this particular F-150, this is what it looks like, and this is where it's at. If I were to get another car, I have to show it because it'd probably be in a little different place. General area, but different place, right? Here it is. This is what it looks like. And so it slows you down at first. However, you ever been to one of them 10-minute oil change places? They got two people working it, don't they? One on the top of the car and one on the bottom, working almost simultaneously. Both of them know what they're doing. And so while it might slow you down at first, you invest in that relationship and you take the time to teach them. It gets so much more efficient. There is a greater return. It's just whether or not you value the relationship enough to slow down. To slow down enough, to invest enough so that you learn together and move on. He says when someone falls, they can help them get up. That's why two is better than one. In other words, falling or failing is inevitable. Like that's going to happen. He's just saying, hey, when that does happen, when falling and failing happens, it's always good if someone is there with you to help you up. Yet that's probably where we begin to struggle a pretty good bit. We say, I don't want someone to see me fall. I don't want someone to see me fail. I'd rather them see me successful. I'd rather them see me thriving. I'd rather them see the version of myself that I really enjoy looking at in the mirror and thinking through the opportunities that I've seized and the moments that I'm making the most of. I want them to be around me then. I don't necessarily want them to be around me when I've fallen or when I'm in the midst of failure. I don't really want that. It makes me uncomfortable. I get it. But this wisdom says it's actually great for them to be there when you fail. In other words, failure is an opportunity to strengthen a friendship. Failure is an opportunity to strengthen a friendship. Now, if you're a follower of Jesus, that's a very trustworthy saying. If you're not a follower of Jesus and you follow the way our community and our society works, then they would tell you that failure is an opportunity for you to disconnect and get on out of there, to disassociate. Or failure is an opportunity for you to cancel something. That instead of taking the time to teach them exactly how things are supposed to work and giving them an opportunity to make it right, no, let's disconnect and let's just distance ourselves. But failure, anticipating it, being ready emotionally and mentally for the people around you to not always get it right, to saying, I'm willing to stay there and be a part of helping you get up off the ground, that sounds a lot like Jesus to me. He goes on, he says, in fact, two can keep warm where one could not. And so he's envisioning like two travelers, and they're traveling, and these two have gotten themselves in a predicament. They're not evidently in a place where there's a village or a town or a hotel, and so it's just going to get cold at night. And so what do? They can find a little ditch and huddle up together, and so their body warmth, their body heat, it kind of shields themselves from the wind. In other words, sometimes it's not going to be just one person that falls is in the predicament. Sometimes you're in a predicament together, and being in the predicament together, you can find a way to survive together. It says one is overpowered, but two can defend themselves. When's the last time you needed someone to come to your defense? When's the last time maybe you had a bad moment and some folks jumped to some conclusions and you had someone say, hey, you didn't get to see the normal side of them today. They're just under a lot of stress. And I know it's an excuse of behavior, but I've known him for a long time. I've known him for a long time, and that's just not him today. Don't we need people like that in our lives that will come to our defense? They'll say, hey, I know him on his good days as well as a day like today that wasn't all that great. It says, a cord of 3 strands is not easily broken. I love that he's saying 2 is better than 1. And then he gives this list of reasons why that's a true statement. And then I love even more that he wraps up those reasons why 2 is better than 1 by saying, but 3. Right? Like 2 is better than 1, but 3. In other words, he's saying, hey, don't seclude yourself. Like, open it up a little bit. Invite more people in. Enlarge your community. Make your little circle of trust a little bit larger. And we talked a couple of weeks ago how when we really invest in relationships, it requires a risk. And sometimes when you allow people to come into that little circle of trust, some of those friends, they might not always get it right. And it might leave you with a guy standing next to you, laughing at you in your failure, and you'll say, this is why I do it myself. That's a possibility. That's a possibility. But I want to believe the best in people. Not avoid some of the best things in life because I'm afraid of the worst in people. He says that, but to give you a little context, we're going to go back to the first half in just a second. This whole thing actually comes because he's talking to a group of folks that are clearly struggling with some wealth and accumulation struggles, right? Some issues. And it appears to, when we read this next piece, you're going to see that whoever this audience is that's struggling with it is reaching to accumulate, to gather more things, to grow their wealth, to grow their income, to grow their nest egg, to grow fill in the blank, whatever it is from a wealth side of things. And what they've done is they've grown this big, enormous, like this, they've reached this financial goal. However, they've neglected the relationships in their life. And so now they're asking the question, why did I do this? Right? Now, what's important in terms of our application is honestly, you can put whatever you want when we talk about wealth in this particular thing. Whatever it is, whatever task-oriented thing that fires you up in your life, that has the potential for you to neglect the relationships in your life, that can go in these blanks as well. This one particular guy, whoever he's talking to, that's what their struggle is. But anytime we put anything else in front of the relationships in our lives, these task-oriented things, and it causes us to lose those relationships, it's just as valid. This is what he says in verse 7 and 8 of chapter 4. It says, again, I saw something meaningless under the sun. There was a man all alone. He had neither son nor brother. There was no end to his toil. Yet his eyes were not content with his wealth. For whom am I toiling? He asked. And why am I depriving myself of enjoyment? This too is meaningless, a miserable business. So he's working and working and working. And he's got what he's been working for. And then he looks around and he has no one. And he asks the question, why am I working so hard? I've got no one here to enjoy this with. There were no relationships left. So what's the point? The author starts it off with, and I saw something meaningless. Meaningless. You know, we read that particular passage. He says, there is no son and no brother. This isn't what I was planning on talking about, but I do want to take a couple of minutes and just interject because I think we can add a third word there, and it has a lot of weight to where we're at currently, and that's father. He had no son, he had no brother. A lot of times in our communities right now, he had no father. And if you look at the events that took place in Texas this past week, it raises the level of relationship awareness, or at least it ought to, in our lives. Because the boy had no father. And so I just want to play a time out just for a moment. There's a lot of things that need to happen to fix some of the issues that our country is dealing with. And it's not a one thing fixes it all. It's very complicated. And I don't want to spend time walking through that. If you want to know my thoughts, you can go to Facebook, and I've got a plan that you can put in place if you want to. But what I do want to talk about specifically in terms of the church is that about a third of you men in here that are fathers, at some point, you're going to decide, I don't want to be a father anymore. I want to unfather. Now, I don't know if that's a real word, but it's a real word to me, and because I've been using it all week. About a third of you are going to decide to unfather, which means at some point, your kids are going to be in a place where they need a father. And you're going to decide whether it's inconvenience or a poor relationship or a fight or finances or just whatever, a job move. You're going to decide, I don't have time to do that piece. I don't have time to do that anymore. And you will disconnect. And my hope is, as you're hearing this today, that you decide not to do that. That you realize the important piece, because there's 8+ billion people in the world. But that person you're a father to, there's only one. You're not 1 in a million. You're not 1 in 10 million. You're not 1 in 100 million. You're 1 in 8+ billion. That's a big deal. Now, there's two pieces to this. It's not only that we've got to make sure we're not unfathering the men in our world, we've got to put more pressure on the other men in our lives. When they begin to talk about unfathering, and you'll know, because when they begin to talk about it, she's too much, or this is just too difficult, or I'll show them, I'm going to pull out. And when you hear things like that, there needs to be something that happens in our hearts as followers of Jesus that says, hey, I don't care what she does. What I care about is what you do and who you are. And you are a father. So you cannot disconnect. And we've got to put pressure. We've got to figure out a way to come alongside the other group of folks that are in our world and in our community. When they begin to wrestle with unfathering themselves, we say, no, there's a better way. There's a better way. I'll help you figure it out. I'll wade into the mess with you. Stay engaged. Stay engaged. Now, regardless of whether we're talking about father-children relationships or friendships, which is the theme of these 3 weeks, maybe you're asking, how do you engage? How do I engage? How do I make that happen? If I have disengaged and I want to re-engage, maybe you're feeling a little convicted, like, okay, all right, I do want to re-engage. I do want to jump back in there. How do I do that? I'm glad you asked. I'm going to give you a few very specific things that you can do to re-engage. And they're super simple. Number 1, be present for celebrations. Be present for celebrations. If there is something to celebrate, be present for the celebration. Right? Don't miss it. If there is something to celebrate in your friend's life, your child's life, fill in the blank, the relationship you want to engage with. Be present for the celebrations. Fight for it. Fight for it. The cool thing about celebrations is that honestly, you can sometimes make up things to celebrate. Like, it don't have to be like this big, huge thing. You can celebrate nearly anything. If it's a friend at work, you could probably go back to text messages and just show up randomly with something cool. Like, I don't know, just whatever. And say, hey, today's your 7-month, 1 day, and 3-hour work anniversary. Congrats, bro. Right? Number 2, be present for the breakthroughs. Be present for the breakthroughs. When they're taking steps forward, when they're working towards something, And finally it begins to happen. Be present for that moment. You might think, well, that's like a celebration. No, it's different. It's different. Yeah, there could be a celebration that comes from it, but you got to be present for the breakthroughs. Sometimes they just need a little encouragement to do the breakthrough, and you can be that. You know what I'm talking about. One of your friends says, I'm thinking about putting in for this promotion. I'm thinking about putting in for this job. But I don't know if I'm qualified. It's like, yeah, you are qualified. And even if they say you're not, then here's a couple good questions you can ask that interviewer and say, hey, when next time comes around, what are some things I need to do to check it off? And encourage them in it. And then say, all right, cool, we got this checklist. Now let's work it together. Let's be there for the breakthrough. Be present for the milestones. Number 3. Be present for the milestones. If you're talking about relationships with children, this is really easy. School is just wrapping up. Most kids in Coweta County, or all kids in Coweta County, they finished up this past week, right? And so that means this coming week, you have the opportunity to pop in and just say, hey, I want to celebrate. I want to be here for this milestone. You just finished 2nd grade, 3rd grade, kindergarten, 6th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade. Let's go get ice cream. Let's go fill in the blank, whatever it is. This is a great week to re-engage. And there's a reason to do it. Number 4. Be present for the hard things. The hard things. When things are difficult, be there. Be there. Now, this is where a lot of times we struggle because we're like, well, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. You know? And we talk ourselves out of it. Tragedy happens, or enormous disappointment happens in someone's life. And just something awful happens. And the first thing in our mind is, I'm going to say the wrong thing. I'm going to say the wrong thing, so I'm going to give them time to breathe. You know, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give them some time. I'm going to give them some space to breathe because I don't trust myself to know what to say. I'm going to show up and I'm not going to say, I don't know what to say. And so I'm going to say the wrong thing. Because I know me, that I'll just start talking. When I feel uncomfortable, I just start saying things. And so I'm going to say the wrong thing and then all of a sudden I'm going to make it worse. And so I'm just going to stay out of it. I'm just going to stay out of it, right? Let me give you some solid advice. Solid advice. If you don't know what to say, number 1, don't let that convince you to not be present. Right? That's the first thing. But the second thing, this is what you say. I'm going to tell you, every single one of you, if you don't know what to say, this is what you say. You show up and you say, I don't know what to say, but I just wanted to be here with you because I care for you. That's it. That's enough. You don't have to say another word. You can just go sit in the corner. That's it. That's it. You just show up and tell them, I don't have words. Right? I don't have words. And I get it. I'm the guy that always finds something to say, right? I just talk, you know? So I know it's easy for me to say it. I'm telling you. I'll tell you, there's a moment in my life, my grandfather passed away. He was a huge deal, just an enormous piece of my life and who I was and who I am. And it wrecked me. I was just wrecked. Just completely wrecked. And Todd, who I didn't know was going to be here today, but he's in the back. Hey, Todd. Todd's not a word guy, right? He's actually gotten a lot better with words the older he's gotten, right? He's pretty witty right now. But Todd didn't know what to say. But I was at my grandmother's house, and he showed up, pulled up to the front. Someone came inside and got me and said, hey, Todd's outside. And so I walked outside, and he was walking up the little walkway, and he had a six-pack of glass bottle Coca-Colas. And he handed it to me, and he gave me a hug, and just said, "I love you, man." That was it. He turned around, went back out in his car, and drove the 35 minutes back to where he lived. That was it. And it meant the world to me that he was just willing to be there. Didn't have anything incredible to say, nothing profound, nothing that was going to change the way I felt, but just him showing up. Just showing up. Have you noticed a theme in the way you fix engaging with relationships? It's one word. Presence. You've got to be there. You've got to show up. You don't have to have the right things to say. You don't have to know what to do. You just have to be there. That's the whole point of Top Gun. Don't leave your wingman. Be present. It doesn't matter how skilled you are, or how much you know, or how great of a pilot you are, or how many kills you got under your belt. None of that matters. What matters is, are you there? Are you there? Be present. Show up. There was a moment in the life of Jesus. He's hanging on the cross. He's struggling to breathe. And he knows he's only got a few breaths left. His mom is just there in front of him. He's looking at her. She's looking at him. And the Bible doesn't tell us if there's any interaction of those, but he does give us a list of people that are standing there with the mother of Jesus. One of them is one of Jesus' best friends. His name's John. And as Jesus prepares to die, he looks at his friend, looks at his mom, and says, "Mother, behold your son. Son, your mother." And Jesus was taking care of his responsibilities as the oldest son. There's no mention of the little brothers that Jesus had, because at this point they all thought he was crazy. It was the resurrection that turned things around for them. So he looks at a friend. He looks at the guy who's present. The guy who's present when he needed him most. And you know the conclusion he came to was, if you're here when I need you most, I can trust you that you'll be there when the people I love need you most. Because the truth is, presence is the most powerful voice we have. Presence is the most powerful voice we have. If you've got friendships that are struggling, find a way to be present. If you've got friendships, relationships that have fallen apart, and you want to re-engage, find a way to be present. Because at the end of the day, I think all of us want friends like this, that are there when we need them most. But the truth is, that's always the wrong question or wrong thought if it's our first question or first thought. Because our first thought needs to be, and our first question needs to be, am I that type of friend for my friends? Am I present how I wish other people would be present? If you're a follower of Jesus, the responsibility always begins with us. We are always the ones that must go first. If Jesus is in the lead, you just step in his steps, one at a time. My hope is you've been thinking about those friends in your life this morning. My second hope is that you've got a plan to be present this coming week.